This is King of Commerce, and today's episode starts now.
Money. Everybody wants more money. Everyone needs money, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to start your own business. As entrepreneurs, capital is something that's sometimes hard to come by, especially if you're young or don't have much to spare. If you have a great idea and you want to scale it to make a profitable and large business, there needs to be some strategy that is involved. Furthermore, there needs to be a Christian worldview when it comes to money and how we should use it as good stewards. So in this episode, we get to talk to Scott Moffitt and Joe Abraham as we learned about the fundamentals of using funding in your business. Let's jump right into this episode.
Welcome to this episode. This time we're going to be talking with Joe about funding, more specifically, what that looks like as a startup.
Okay.
How should I pursue this as an entrepreneur? And do I really need it?
All right, start asking some real specific questions. I'm ready to go.
So for some background, Luke and I we've dabbled in entrepreneurship.
Outside of this, by the way.
Outside of this project. But we've both had the questions of, should we get an investor? Should we get a funder? Because we're college students, we're paying for college, we have our expenses, we haven't started our main careers yet. And so there are so many questions about funding that we have, and we imagine many people in the audience have those similar types of questions as well. So I'm a guy who grew up with the mentality, never have debt, just use your own money, work for your own money, kind of do it yourself mentality. And that's something I've had to wrestle with through my own business that I've started. So my first question to you, Joe, as you've advised hundreds, if not thousands of entrepreneurs, what would you say, is it better to bootstrap and do it yourself if you can? And would you say that perhaps getting an investor is a last resort method?
Yeah, I think as we unpack this together, we're going to find that is true. Better to take this as far as you can go before you bring in an investor for a lot of different reasons that we can unpack together. But here's a question for you guys. Do you find that as entrepreneurship students, people involved in the college community, you're in the entrepreneurship club and all that your generation really feels the pressure of, I have an idea, I got to go get funding? That funding is almost like one of the early steps that's in the back of your mind, as opposed to one of the last steps. So how is it kind of being talked about in your generation?
That was actually something that's true for me in my case. About, I believe, a year ago at this point, I went ahead and did the pitch, and I participated, had an idea that ended up winning. I'm very thankful for that opportunity. But to really pursue it, I needed money because I can't program, I can't code, and I don't know how to go about making money. I'm just here with the experiences of my father and those around me back home where they've bootstrapped their businesses and they've pulled it up, but a lot of theirs have been service-based.
Yeah.
And here I was trying to get into something that's product-based, and it was very different in my mind, and I just wasn't sure. And so sadly, is something I had to put down and leave, and it's off on the sidelines for now. But what are your thoughts? Yeah,
what I found from, again, businesses I've operated and all the businesses I've advised, especially in the early stage, startup stage, trying to get the money, whether you're going to borrow it or get an investor or whatever it is, takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of focus. Figuring out your pitch, building your pitch deck, getting it tweaked, learning how to do your pitch, then going and pitching, and then doing all the follow-up with investors who kind of, disappear on you. And now you got to send them the emails and the phone calls. And during this whole time, your mind is consumed with getting that money. It's a sale of its own. It's like selling a product. Your product happens to be the business. But I've seen entrepreneurs go 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years in just the chase of the investors. And all that time and market time is lost in the process. So that's where I see the big gap. That's where I see the big risk. It's not so much should you get money or should you not. Some entrepreneurs have access to money faster than others, right? Depends who you know, your network, your family, your background, whatever. But no matter what, the time it takes to get it's something you have to weigh rather than say, should I just bootstrap? Let me just get this a little further along and maybe we get a couple customers that'll lead to the money that we need.
Yeah, I think in my experience, there's kind of these two rivaling mentalities. One's like, I'm going to do this all by myself. Like, I don't need any help. I'm just going to grind this out and hopefully it works out. The other side's like, I need to spend money to make money. And I think with that mentality, people just want to buy success and just hope it works out.
And I don't think either of those are the right mindset for an entrepreneur who wants to build a God-honoring business, right? The whole thing of I'll do it myself, I'll bootstrap it, there's a little bit of pride in that, right?
Exactly.
You can sense that even in the person saying it, of like, I don't need anybody else. Okay, that kind of goes against a lot of things in the Bible about community and all that stuff, right? So let's put that one aside. And then the other one is, hey, I'll just play with other people's money, right? It takes money to make money. Let's just go get it and then just do all kinds of cool stuff and hire all kinds of people and get cool office space. And okay, that's kind of wasteful from a stewardship perspective. So what should our attitude be? I think the attitude, just to recommend, and let's unpack it together. My recommendation is, say, I'm in this to serve a customer, right? How can I get my product moving? How can I prove that my business is viable? How can I get to revenue and maybe even a little bit of profit? How do I prove traction, that this isn't just an idea? How do I get to traction? And then the terms of any fundraising I would do, whether it's borrow money or get an investor, are going to be much sweeter. So how far can I take it between me and the people surrounding me?
What would you define traction as?
Yeah, so I guess with every business it's different, but you have to define that for your startup. But it basically has to be enough proof that someone who's not involved in the business says, oh, wow, it's working. Now, a sophisticated investor will have a different definition of that versus your Aunt Kelly, right? But just like, it's not just an idea. I've taken it from idea to something that proves market acceptance. So like in the lean startup system, traction is not even considered you sold product. It's you talk to 100 people and a certain percentage of them said, if you build it, I will buy. Even that's considered traction because some early stage investors will look at that and go, okay, I'm willing to give you your first 50K based on the market research you've done, right? So it all depends on how you define it. And again, the type of business you're building.
So it's going to be very different, in my opinion, going from a product-based to a service-based business. What would you say are some nuances of each of those industries?
So let's use yours as an example, right? So you had an opportunity to go pitch last year. You came up with a great idea. You pitched it, only to realize, man, people think it's a good idea, but now it's going to take money. I got to hire a developer. I got to build a website. All the stuff that I can't do. So that's going to take $50 an hour for this person and $75 an hour for that person, and add it all up, it's like 25 grand, let's say, right? To get this thing. Now, when that $25,000 obstacle hits, you had a choice as an entrepreneur. You could say, okay, I believe in this enough that I'm going to figure out how to get the 25 grand. If I've exhausted every other option, I can't take a class and learn how to code. I can't do this myself. I don't have a best friend who I can call in a favor with. All those are exhausted. I have to outsource and pay someone. That was the test of that particular entrepreneurial idea to say, is it worth it? Am I going to call my Uncle Jim, who I know has a couple dollars, and put it all on the line and say, Uncle Jim, this is it. Trust me, believe in me, give me the 25K. Or you're like, well, 25K is a lot of money. Maybe I'll come up with a better idea later, right? And my guess is somewhere along the line, you rationalize to say, I'm not willing to put all my chips on the table of my credibility, my reputation, my family's reputation to go get that 25K. I'll save that favor for another time. So assuming you went through that journey, you kind of went through the entrepreneurial experience to say, do I have enough passion and is this viable enough for me to go after? And as soon as if you say yes, you would have been able to find the 25. Somebody somewhere, somehow would have bet on you to give you the 25K. You just had to believe in it enough, right? So in that case, but let's say he was in that situation where he believes in it, he's on fire, I'm going to go do this, here's my plan, because if you give me the 25, I'm going to turn it into 250. He would have gotten the money. It would have taken you a while, but he would have gotten the money. And then it would have been the best decision because without it, no business. With it, success. So in that case, it would have been like, I can't bootstrap. I got to get the money. So how do I go get it?
So what about the product side?
So yeah, product side is same. I think we'll end up talking to a couple of entrepreneurs who've built product businesses right out of Cedarville, right? At some point you design it, you could draw it on paper, but at some point you got to order molds. At some point, you got to get a manufacturer to do a run of 1,000 or 2,000 or 500 units. And typically they're like, I need all my money up front. You guys are brand new. I can't give you 90-day terms. You're paying me up front. So you got to figure out, okay, between getting the product made and shipped and building a website, we're back to, oh man, it's $5,000, $10,000 to get this business off the ground. And that's the test. Do I believe in this enough to go figure out how to get the money? Do I pre-sell product? Do I show pictures and get customers to pre-buy? Do I do a Kickstarter campaign and get the money? Do I call Aunt Jenny and say, Aunt Jenny, you know that college money you were promising me? I'll trade the college money for this. Or 3 or 4 of you say, I'll go raise $3,000 for my family each and we'll get our $10,000 in. Where there's a will, there's a way in entrepreneurship. But if you don't feel that readiness to put it all on the table, it's not time.
So let's say I'm starting a product-based, specifically business right now. And you're saying that if I have an idea, I've gone through my market research, I've done my testing, a smart way to go about it would be, let's go into pre-orders, see who's interested to sign up. And then I can be like, okay, here's this at this cost, sell it to those who are interested, and be like, oh, guys, I'm so sorry that there's this added weight because it's getting manufactured. Here is this little extra thing.
Here's
for
your
you
bonus.
instead.
You're going to get a cool t-shirt. You're going to be part of a certain buying club. Think of knowing who your target audience is.
Mm-hmm.
What can you offer them that would rock their world? Yeah, it's a lot of time. Listen, even in mega businesses where we're doing $5 million, $10 million orders, it's called supplier or manufacturer financing. You figure out a way where they fund it or your customer funds it and you're just in the middle. It's the same mindset of, okay, I don't have it. Who has it? Can the manufacturer afford to just make it, hold it, and I pay them later? Or can my customer pre-buy and give them some benefits to get it done? It happens even in the biggest deals on earth, so why not in your startup?
Can we go back to, you mentioned the Lean Startup
Mm-hmm.
book. I read that recently, and we had a comment on LinkedIn wanting to dive into the Lean Startup just a little bit more. From what I remember, they talked about the process of iterative learning.
Yep.
Would you say that it's true that sometimes learning and doing small batches is more valuable than having a whole bunch of sales? And could that be a way to get an investor's attention perhaps more easily than saying we got this many sales?
I find that this generation of investors respond more to that. That, hey, I did a little bit, I proved it, and then I went to the next step, I proved it, then I went to the next step and I proved it, and now I'm on step 4 and I need your help. Because then they can see the little wins, they can see success, they can see that you can execute. I think that's the big thing for a young entrepreneur is you have to prove to whoever has the money that you have the ability to execute. So what could create that picture for them? And that's why I think the Lean Startup methodology is so successful. It's what Silicon Valley is built on. Different iterations of it exist today, but really, even if you look at all the new stuff being taught in all the tech startup incubators and accelerators, it has the underlying principles of Lean Startup. Iterative, agile, learn with your customer, modify as you go. Don't kill yourself doing market research for 6 months. Just talk to 100 people and get going. That's kind of the speed to market.
So I'm doing this now. I have my business, I have my idea, I have my product, and I'm looking for an investor.
Yeah.
Does it really matter, or would you even say it matters who I take money from as a Christian? Should I try and put in the extra effort trying to go to
Good
another
question.
Christian who might be willing to invest in me? Or would be like, oh, this person's just willing to invest. I don't care about their background religiously.
Good question.
I'm fine with that.
So Luke, remember, I don't know, it was a few episodes ago in season 1, Scott Moffat mentioned that there's smart money and dumb money. So let's go back to that real quick and say, dumb money is someone who can just write you a check, but they can't add any other value to the business. So literally an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, a mom, a dad, somebody down the street who happens to have cash is all considered in investor world dumb money. And most sophisticated investors hate dumb money because if they gave you money in a seed round, now the sophisticated investors have to deal with them in round 2 and 3 and buy them out and deal with all their, nose wiping because they don't understand risk and all that kind of stuff. So dumb money sounds great. It's fast, but in some cases you don't want it. But in some cases, if hey, look, I only need the 25K. Going back to your example, once I get my 25K and launch my business, I don't think I need more money. I can just cash flow from there. In which case, going to quote dumb money, an uncle and aunt, a cousin, dad's IRA makes sense because you never have to deal with other investors. But if you think that your business is one that's going to need a round 2, 3, 4, and 5, dumb money is a really bad idea. It's going to create lots of complications for you later. Then there's smart money. Smart money is basically money that doesn't just give you the money, but they have connections. They have industry relationships. They have knowledge. They have experience. They may even have customers they can bring in, right? It's kind of like why sometimes when you watch Shark Tank, some people really want to do a deal with so-and-so or really want to do a deal with so-and-so. Why? Because they've researched that person and they know that they already have 4 companies in that area. They already have 600 customers that could do it. That's called smart money. Versus another shark who could just write them a check but not have as much impact on the business. So that's what you have to weigh out based on your business. Some businesses are just fine with dumb money. Some need smart money. And now to your question on where does faith play into this? Would it be awesome to have a Christian invest in a Christian business? Yes, because you're mutually aligned. There's methods for conflict resolution, right? Blah, blah, blah. You just shrunk your market by like 98%.
Sounds
Because
like we need more Christian investors, guys.
Well, because there's only so many Christian investors, right? And that's a sad thing to say, but it's just a reality. So you've shrunk your market. So if you have the network in Christian entrepreneur world and you're part of the community, great. But if you're not tapped into that community, which is a very small community, you could be boxing yourself in by saying, I only want money from a Christian entrepreneur.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I think Cedarville does have a Christian entrepreneur or a Christian investor network.
Yeah.
I think it's called Beyond
Beyond
Angels.
Angels, yep.
That's a really cool organization. Now, you've been an angel investor before, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, like from the other side of the table, what do you look for in a company to invest? Like when they're presenting their pitch, what determines if they actually need funding, if they're going to take that funding and produce good fruit?
So, good question. I think most early stage investors would agree. They're just betting on the person. They're falling in love with something about that person, something in their eye, the spark, the passion, the grit, right? Those are some things that you're kind of intrinsically trying to identify. Even when we were at the pitch, we who were there were getting excited about the people who just seemed like they knew their stuff and they were confident and they were going to make this work with or without us. So that's some things we look for. But then the question is, going back to those little wins, has this young entrepreneur created any little wins, either in their business, or let's say it was like you in the idea stage, what in your life or your history would suggest to me that you know how to win? You know, you're a cross-country runner. So that means I know you've lost. I know you've felt failure. I know you've thrown up on the side during practices. I know how to fight through pain to get somewhere. I would want to know that about you, because if you just came and did a pitch and you didn't give me your cross-country background, I'd be like, is this just a guy who next week could lose interest in this thing, right? So what can you do to demonstrate your ability to execute either in this business ideally or in life in general? Those are just some of the intrinsic things we would look for.
Now that's kind of interesting, because when I think of, businesses, I kind of think of a cutthroat, just give me the stats, give me the facts. But you're saying it's actually about who you are as a person that can actually influence who wants to invest in you.
Until there's lots of facts, right? Like my company now, the one that I'm operating, has a 4-year history. So if I had to go raise money, I'd give them 4 years of P&Ls and tax returns, facts, data. But when you guys are just ideating and getting a business off the ground, there's not enough data. So then it has to be about you, because most entrepreneurs or investors know that your business is going to pivot like 6 times, right? So no matter how convinced you are that it's going to be a web platform with this, and this is my audience, and it's going to pivot. So again, at the early stage, I have to bet on you. Year 2, 3, I need to see all the data, because now I want to know, is the business model sound? Is the revenue model sound? And now does it make sense to invest from a different perspective completely? And then you matter less.
So then, with that said, I know we have investing, but we also have debt.
Yeah.
Are there any specific times where you're like, okay, it is fine and great in this situation to go into debt to start your business? Or are there times where you're like, I strongly recommend not going into debt to start your business or to get it off the ground in this case? What are your thoughts on that?
This is really where being a Christian entrepreneur or saying I want to follow God and honor God, okay, debt is one of those areas where it's going to become very clear whether you're planning on honoring God and following him or not. In that, debt in itself isn't evil, nothing wrong with it, but debt entered into without discernment is crushing, right? The Bible says the borrower is the lender's slave, right? It's there for a reason, is because the hasty borrower literally creates for themselves an environment that they can never get out of. I'll give you an example. There's plenty of businesses where an entrepreneur was so excited. So you know the example we were talking about, Luke, earlier. Let's say the 25 grand you needed wasn't necessarily to write code and build some stuff. It was to order product. If I just order, my supplier says if I make a $25,000 order, I'll get this special price and we're going to be so much more profitable. I got to get it. You put it on a credit card or dad's credit card that happened to have the limit to make the one-time order because there's a buyer ready to take all the product 6 weeks from now, right? You're like, okay, I know it's high interest, but that impulsive jump to do it, what if this falls through? And then what happens is there's an entire industry now that's been around forever, but it's called factoring, where you got so addicted to debt. So you came to me and borrowed money to place the first order, but now you need to place the second order, but the money hasn't come in to pay it off. So now you come back to me and I'm like, yeah, but for a little higher interest. And then there's another group, Luke will say, yeah, I'll loan you money subject to all the orders you have pending. So I'll give you a loan based on your pending orders at a high interest rate. And you're like, perfect. The orders are on their way in anyway. So yeah, you're willing to lend me the money, I'll take it. But then what happens is the money comes in. As the money is coming in from those pending orders, he's taking his money off the top to get paid back. It's part of a legal contract. So now suddenly all that cash flow is gone, but you still have to make payroll. You still have to run your advertising. You still have to get your trucks on the road. So you end up in this trap that almost never ends. So that's debt when it's entered into impulsively and done improperly.
So one of the leading voices in Christian finance, he says that you should never really take on debt. What do you think about this in regards to Christian stewardship?
I think it's a good general principle, but if that was the rule for Christian entrepreneurship, 90% of the businesses wouldn't exist today. I'm talking manufacturing companies, shipping companies, transportation companies. Debt, when entered into with wisdom and a stewardship mindset, becomes a powerful multiplier. But debt rushed into or impulsively betting on something that isn't locked and loaded, very dangerous.
Interesting.
So then when would you say specifically, given an example, like this is a good example of going into debt? This is not a good example.
I would say, since typically we're talking to early stage entrepreneurs in our show, right? I would say the rule should generally be no debt as an early stage business. The exception to that would be, how when you did, let's say you're following the lean startup methodology, you've done your market research, you've talked to some potential customers, and a couple of them are like, not only would we buy when you build it, based on how cool your idea is, I'll give you a standing order now. I'll give you a letter of intent. I'll give you a purchase order. Go build it, and I'll order for the next 6 months. It happens. I know entrepreneurs who were fortunate enough to end up in that situation, right? So when an established, successful, what they call a paper business is giving you a standing order as a startup, that's bankable. That's borrow money all day long to fund whatever you need rather than give up equity. Because at that point, think about this. If you need $500,000 or 25 grand and you have to go get equity, you'd have to give up a third to half your company to get the $500,000. A bank would lend you the money at 4, 5, 6% interest, depending on the interest rate of the day, because you have an A-paper buyer on the other side. So there's times when bank financing or lender financing is exponentially wiser of an investment and stewardship than equity, because if you give up half your company, you go land this deal, it grows, and now your company's worth $5 million, $10 million, $20 million, and some investor who was at the right place at the right time now owns half of it. That's money you could have been using for kingdom stuff that you now have to write them a check for half the company proceeds versus just paying 4% interest on that same money and having 100% to achieve your vision. See what I'm saying? Like those are some of the things to wrestle through and get some counsel on.
So really, the wise decision is never rush into debt.
Yeah. Never rush into debt, and never go into debt based on a promise or a if we build it, they will come, or I'm betting on it happening. Those are really bad times to do debt. But if it's in paper, it's signed, sealed, delivered, contracted, it's a no-brainer time to do debt. Again, with counsel, with advice, with guidance.
So then on top of that, you're also like, hey, make sure that you have this wise counsel around you. Make sure that you have people in your church, well trusted, who are like, okay, here is my advice on this. Here are your thoughts.
Yeah, like if you go to a deacon at your church who are usually kind of financially minded and say, here's the deal on the table. This group has signed a contract. I need X dollars. I could do an equity deal and give up this. I could do debt. The bank's willing to give me Y. They'll guide you through it and advise you through it. And then you still have to discern and make the decision yourself.
So the general rule is, we're talking investors, we're talking debt, just don't do it unless it's necessary, essentially, right?
Yeah, as far as you could take the business on your own, as far as you can get those little wins. And sometimes early stage companies, we feel we have to go hit the home run day one. I don't need the 100,000 piece order. I don't need to get into Dick's Sporting Goods or Walmart on my first swing at the bat. Can I just get the 10 units a week order? Can I just get the little store at the corner to buy? Can I just get those little wins as I work my way towards the big swing? And those little wins, sometimes I can cash flow myself. I can work some extra hours. I can get a couple buddies to chip in, get a friend or family member to help out. Those are much better ways to kind of get going.
I think what we're talking about this, for me, it kind of comes down to patience.
Yeah.
Right. It's all about when you're starting off there, you want to be patient in when you take on risk. But you want to be impatient when it comes to making a difference, making an impact, providing value.
I love what you just said. Be patient when taking on risk and debt and raising money. Be very impatient when it comes to just getting on the streets and selling. Picking up the phone and making the calls, getting in your car and getting the sales, getting on social media and posting another video, right? Those all cost nothing. But sometimes we hope to get this pile of cash that's going to solve all our problems. And usually that pile of cash brings a whole different set of problems that you didn't have when it was just you busting butt, making it happen with no money in your bank account.
To me, it almost seems like getting an investor, getting into debt early is a symptom of not wanting to actually do the hard work.
In some cases, it can be. And I think it's accentuated by kind of the tech boom, right? Hey, I just came up with an idea. I went to a weekend hackathon and there were 4 investors there and I got, $50,000. And then 6 weeks later, we got a $500,000, round and now we're worth $10 million. And you hear about that enough and you read enough articles and watch enough YouTube videos about it. You're like, that's how it's supposed to be. And the reality is that's the unicorn. They call them unicorns for a reason. That means all the others don't qualify, never get there, and would have been much better off with your idea, which is just go execute. And in the time it takes me to convince an investor, I could convince 3 friends to just sweat equity our way through success. You didn't have a developer. I bet you if you really, really had that passion and God had called you to that business, you would have convinced a developer here to come write the code with you. But it just wasn't your calling. That business wasn't what God wanted you to do. If he did, the resources would have showed up and they wouldn't have wanted the money. They would have been taking 5% equity. Who knows what deal you would have cut with them.
So I'm curious, as you've advised hundreds, thousands entrepreneurs, you talked about the unicorn where you see it, they almost seems like they achieve instant overnight success. You get this in all the videos and all the podcast shows. But if you could kind of think back to those you've worked with, what do you think is like the average time to be in that startup phase? Because we want to be impatient. We want to get success now. What does it really look like?
It can take, again, it depends on the type of business, right? Technology is a little bit faster than product, which is a little bit faster than service, right? But in general, you should plan to be willing to grind it out for 2 to 3 years. Are you willing, do you care about this enough to grind it out for 2 or 3 years with no money, no, real big success, just a few wins along the way, a few losses, only to have it then go up from there? If you can stomach that, chances are you'll have success a lot sooner. But I think that's a healthy number to think about, which is why in previous episodes I've advised against going into partnership right away, because typically you may have a 2-year run. You may be like, I'm giving this 2 years, 3 years, no questions asked. Your partner may not. They may be thinking, hey, if in 90 days we're not the unicorn, I'm kind of bored of this, right? And so that's why, yeah, if you're really passionate, 2 to 3 years is the commitment.
So then, just going back with that expectation of 2 to 3 years, would you say, from what you've seen with so many businesses that you've worked with, it should be, oh, I've saved up enough money and banked that going into it that I can now afford to work on this full time for 2 to 3 years? Is it me working on this part time while I still work and do whatever job I need to do to make ends meet or pour extra money into my business? That way I'm not like putting money away in these different ways, but it's going here because that's the investment and the rate of return, or is it?
I think, again, it depends on the business, but in general, I find that most startups can be started up on a part-time basis. It's very seldom that you need to go all in full-time, quit your job, fire your boss kind of stuff. There may be a couple. Out of every 50, there may be 3 that need that, but I would say 47 out of 50, you can get those little wins. You can get the traction while being a student full-time, while having a job full-time, and moving it along. And then there's that magical moment where it's clear. The big order comes in, right? The 10 store orders turn into a Walmart order, turn into a Target order, or whatever it may be. The equivalent of that, you land the big fish. That's when you quit. You don't quit before you land the big fish of whatever your industry is.
So as we wrap up this episode, it seems like before we even think about going into debt or getting an investor, we need to ask ourselves, have we worked 2 to 3 years?
Yeah.
And have we put that sweat into it? Have we worked hard before we jump into, let's get money?
Or even if you're in that early part of the first 2 to 3 years, have I proven this enough that someone on the outside who doesn't give a rip about my business will look at it and go, that's got legs. That train's leaving the station and I want to get on the train. Get the train moving, get it leaving the station, and then let's talk to investors and bankers. But if the train's still sitting at the station and there's no gas in the tank, you're going to spend 6 months pitching only to have investors go, oh, that sounds interesting. Let's talk in 6 months. Keep in touch. I do that all the time. Keep in touch. That's my way of saying train's at the station. I could wait 6 months and it'll still be there. Right? I want you to ask for money when the train's leaving the station and you're creating FOMO for me. Man, this kid's going to hit it out of the park with or without me. All he needs is $50K. Man, what else am I going to do with $50K? That's where you want your investors and even your banker and lender thinking he's already got the deal. I just have to provide him the cash, and in 90 days, it's going to turn back around. Get the train moving. That's the key.
Awesome.
That's a lot to process and decompress. So I'm going to need a moment. But with that said, thank you so much, guys, for listening on this episode. We'll be back next week as we dive in.
And before we end the episode, I just want to remind you guys, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X. Give us a follow, give us a DM, say what's up. And
and if there's friends who you may not be starting a business, but you probably know friends, family members who are in it, tell them about this program. And
follow along, especially on our social medias, because we'll be asking you guys what you want to know about entrepreneurship, specifically from a Christian worldview. So with that being said, thank you all for watching this episode of Kingdom Commerce. We'll see you in the next one.